and you can see with your naked eye, like you stir up the sediment just in the creek in town, and you can see the chemicals. So there's massive distrust when people in town see this, and then they hear the EPA saying that. It's like they don't know who to trust, and they're fed up.
Well, I trust you, and I appreciate you doing the job, Rich, and so does that community, because, you know, they're not getting enough attention. So, Scott Smith, I pivot to you, and they say, yeah, listen, yeah, Smith is doing his tests, but he's being real particular, okay? And there are a lot of chemicals that we're all exposed to with what we clean and what we eat and what we drink and in the environment. You can pick up lots of things. It doesn't mean that everyone's going to be, you know, toxified. What do you think of that notion, and what have you seen over time in your samples?
Chris, first of all, thanks for having me, and you are a direct witness because you were with me for this testing. And let me tell you, and Chrissy Hilton specifically is very important to all of East Palestine, and here's why. She vacated that house and wasn't back. That completely defeats the narrative, chemicals in her house, her lifestyle, because that house was vacant. And the furnace filter, the soil, showed dramatic increases in contamination, about 325% in soil from when I tested it with News Nation in May to when I tested it with you.
So they say to you, Scott, listen, we're digging things up. It may be bad for a little bit because we're disrupting it, but it's all going to settle and we're remediating and it'll be better long term. Do you buy that?
At this time, no. I will buy it when the testing tells me that's the case, because there's something no one's talking about, the third event, the remediation that started after April 18th, after the EPA shut down a lot of their important testing. So that third event with potentially dioxin dust particles and a whole host of other issues.
Smith joins us now. Scott's an independent scientist. He's the Government Accountability Project's whistleblower client. You were listening to Rich's reporting, and I'm sure you're familiar with his reporting throughout all of this. Your reaction to what you just heard, including the EPA's response?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me, Connell, but the EPA is clearly operating as the public relations arm for the multi-billion-dollar corporation Norfolk Southern. So first of all, they have declared public health emergencies in Times Beach, Missouri, and also in Love Canal. So that's not accurate, what they say. And you got to learn with the EPA to look very carefully at their statements. They're talking about the drinking water. There may not be a problem with the drinking water. And also the 100 million tests, the EPA wants you to think that they're doing the tests. But to the best of my knowledge, the majority of these tests are done by Norfolk Southern contractors. And in my work with Leslie Pacey and the Government Accountability Project, we've got FOIA. This is not us making it up. These are actual details that I sent to your team today, where there's one email where the Norfolk Southern tells the EPA, deal with us, don't deal with our contractors. So who's really in charge here? It's just not credible what the EPA is saying.
Okay, let's back up for a moment and just get everybody up to speed on exactly what we're talking about. First, the timeline. Let's put the timeline up on this disaster that meant, much of our audience is very, very familiar with the derailment on the 3rd of February last year, the evacuations after that on the 5th, mandatory evacuations expanding on the 6th, and the order for evacuations lifted on the 8th. And if we have the list of toxic chemicals that's further down the line of our list of screens that we have there, we can put that up as well, because this, Scott, might be what you can be able to speak to. See, there it is, vinyl chloride linked to brain, lung, and blood cancers, and all these other chemicals down the list, toxic by ingestion, and another that causes burning, irritation to the skin and eyes, and the last one that causes dizziness and drowsiness. And, your point is that this should be more than enough to declare this a public health emergency, but also that there was precedent for that, they've done it before.
Absolutely. Let me put this in context.
Sure.
I've been doing it for 18 years and over 60 disasters, starting with my own. What makes East Palestine different is every chemical I've ever come across in 60 disasters is present in East Palestine. Why? It's the chemicals on the train. And why? The dioxins mixed with the chemicals you just cited and the polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, cancer-causing, just like the dioxins. And there has never been a mixture of chemicals released like this. That's what makes East Palestine different and why East Palestine should be declared a public health emergency. In the EPA, they can talk about 100 million, they can talk about 1 billion tests, they can take all the upwind samples and they can manipulate all they want, but they have refused to test side by side with me. And I sent you an email from July 27th.
Right.
I have been willing to sit down with them and test side by side. They refuse. And on Taggart Street, I can tell you, I have a trend where the fingerprint from where the derailment was matches with what we are seeing, and you have the burning from February 3rd to 9th creating those dioxins. Then
Right.
you have the controlled explosion. Then you have the third event, and no one's talking about this. The third event is the ongoing heavy remediation after April 18th, which we are showing an increase in contamination and sulfur run in the sediment and in residents reporting health symptoms. And I continue to offer to sit down with the EPA, but they will not sit down with me.
They won't sit down with you. What about right now, Scott? What would you say about right now, as to best of your knowledge, with the most recent testing and data that you have, East Palestine and the situation, April 2024? What's it like?
Well, I would tell you that the good news, in a way, is, and all the smears and defamation coming at me from the EPA and Norfolk Southern, 60% of my results do say things are within background. 40% is in hot zones. So the hot zones need immediate follow-up testing, and that's by the EPA's own contractors. And they're refusing to test in what I call a hot zone, where you have elevated levels per their own standards set by the EPA. And they refuse to test these hot zones in these affected areas where residents are reporting health symptoms.
Still, present day, right now.
Still.
Yeah.
They still refuse.
Scott, we thank you for your time, Scott Smith, and we'll stay, as we have been, on top of this story. Here's